Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, JTF. My name is Chaim ben Pesach. This program is dedicated to elevating the souls of Simcha bat Rachel, Pesach ben Chava, Harab Meir Kehana, Bari Hoffman, Reuven Hoffman, and Yosef ben Meir. We want to speak about two major subjects on this week's program. One is a Hebrew video that we put out last night in which we illustrate an example of how Benjamin Netanyahu, the so-called Prime Minister of Israel, and the Israeli government are betraying the people of Israel, are betraying the Jewish people. Just an illustration that really shows you the type of betrayal that is taking place in Israel. And the second subject we want to speak about is Mike Pence, Donald Trump's pick for vice president. Mike Pence is perhaps the wimpiest politician in America today, and we're going to explain to you some of the reasons why he is such an unbelievable wimp. And he's a disaster. He's a disastrous pick. But first, we've done many videos in Hebrew explaining to the people of Israel why Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party and the other phony right parties in Israel, Naftalí Bennett, the Jewish Home Party, Avigdor Lieberman, Israel is our home party, Shas, Aguda, all of these parties on the phony right are disastrous for Israel, are always betraying the people of Israel. But we just did another Hebrew video last night giving an illustration of how horrible this betrayal truly is. After the recent murder of two Jews, last week in fact, the murder of two Jews in Judea and Samaria, two Jews brutally slaughtered by Fatah terrorists. Fatah is the terrorist organization that is supported by the Israeli government, that is supported by the United States and Israeli taxpayers, that is supported by the Israeli traitor news media. The Fatah terrorists brutally slaughtered two innocent Jews and then bragged about it. And the Israeli government, of course, is going to continue to fund the Fatah terrorists. They give them free electricity, free water, free food, free medicine, free housing, free education, everything on a silver platter, things that they never give Jews in Israel for free. But beyond that, Netanyahu said, after these two Jews were murdered, after these two Jewish souls were taken from us, that he's going to give 40 million shekels to southern Har Hebron, to the Jewish settlers, the heroic Jewish settlers in southern Har Hebron. Hebron, in English Hebron, Hebron is Ir Avotenu, is the city of our forefathers. It's the second holiest city in the world, the second holiest city in Torah Judaism, after Yerushalayim, after Jerusalem. And Netanyahu has done everything he can to freeze building in Hebron, to freeze building throughout Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem, to do everything he can to hurt the Jewish settlers, to hurt the Jewish pioneers, to prevent these Jews from moving enough Jews into these areas in order to save Israel from the creation of a so-called Palestinian state, because the enemies of Israel, the enemies of the Jewish people, want to create a so-called Palestinian state in Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem. Even though there is no Palestine, there are no Palestinians, that's a historical bluff and a fraud and a hoax. But they want to create a so-called Palestinian state in the heart of biblical Israel. Take away Israel's biblical heartland and create a so-called Palestine state. That would be national suicide for Israel. The only hope we have of preventing that is moving as many Jews as possible into Judea, Samaria, and eastern Jerusalem. And because if there are too many Jews there, it's just not practical. They won't be able to throw them all out, and they won't be able to create a terrorist Islamic state there. Now, there are already 400,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria, but they're all concentrated near the border. Only about 100,000 are in the areas which Israel wants to surrender. So we got to move as many Jews as possible there. That's one of our great challenges. It's one of the great national challenges of our time. And Netanyahu and the Likud have frozen Jewish building, have done everything they could to prevent more Jews from moving there, while encouraging the Arab enemies of the Jewish people to build and move there and grow and flourish there as much as possible. So Netanyahu, under pressure to show that he's doing something about these constant murder, the constant brutal murder of Jews, under pressure he said, I'm going to give 40 million shekels to Har Hebron. 40 million shekels is about $10 million. The shekel is the Israeli currency. It's about $10 million. $10 million for southern Har Hebron is a joke, a complete joke. This is the same Netanyahu and the same Netanyahu, Bennett, Lieberman, Derry regime in Israel that give billions of dollars to Israel's Arab Nazi enemies that want to destroy the Jewish people. But Netanyahu suddenly said he's going to give a measly $10 million to Har Hebron, to southern Har Hebron. A complete joke, nothing. Days later, Netanyahu announces that he's going back and he's breaking his promise to give the $10 million. He's not even going to give them the $10 million. Even this pittance, this joke, he won't even give them that. He announced he decided not to give it to them, and prevented the Israeli cabinet from voting to give them the money, to transfer them the money, even though Netanyahu publicly gave his word that he was going to give them the money. And again, even if he had given them the money, it would have been a joke. But even this, he doesn't keep his word on. Even with this, he breaks his promise. Netanyahu always breaks his promises to the Jewish people. Netanyahu never keeps his word. Netanyahu always works against the best interests of Israel and the Jewish people. And the reason is because he's a coward. He's a coward, he's a disgrace. He's turned himself into a puppet of Barack Hussein Obama and the European Union and the United Nations and all the forces that pressure Israel. The minute there's any pressure on Israel, he right away caves in. So that, in effect, makes him a puppet. He's also a puppet of the traitor forces in Israel, like the Israeli news media, like the Israeli billionaires that want Israel to commit national suicide. All the evil traitor forces in Israel, the fifth columnists in Israel, Netanyahu does their bidding. He does whatever they tell him to do. So Netanyahu betrays the people of Israel, betrays the heroic Jews in Judea and Samaria and the heroic Jews in Hebron, and helps the enemies of the Jewish people. That's the phony right in Israel. And yes, in Israel, the phony right is worse than the open left. The Likud and the phony right do more damage than the open left. Not that the left doesn't want to do damage, not that the left doesn't want to create a Palestinian state and destroy the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and hand over Jerusalem, our eternal capital, to our enemies. The left wants to do that, but they're unable to carry out that plan when they're in power because the vast majority of the Israeli people resist when the left-wing government tries to do it. When the left-wing government tries to do it, all of a sudden, there's tremendous resistance. Why? Because then the Likud and the Jewish Home Party and all the phony right, they start screaming and yelling, hey, what are you doing? You can't do this. This is suicide. All of a sudden, they start saying this is suicide, the phony right, and there's massive opposition, and the natural massive resistance and opposition of the majority of the people of Israel make it impossible to carry out the policies. I'm not saying a left-wing government is not dangerous in Israel. It is, and I'm not saying left-wing governments haven't done terrible things in Israel. They certainly have. But the vast majority of Israeli surrender of land, about 80 or 90% of the land that has been surrendered by Israel, in fact, 90% of the land that has been surrendered by Israel since the 1967 Six-Day War has not been surrendered by left-wing governments, but by phony right governments. The phony right has done far more damage than the open left. So the phony right in Israel, the Likud, is worse than the left. Worse than the left, even. Again, the left are traitors, they're evil, they're disgusting people. But the phony right, because they give Jews the illusion that it's a so-called right-wing government, they emasculate any opposition, any resistance, and the Jews feel, well, if Netanyahu's proposing it, it's probably not that bad. That's why it took someone like Arik Sharon from the phony right to expel the Jews in Gush Katif. And it took someone like Menachem Begin from the phony right to surrender all of Sinai, which was 75% of all the land Israel had. Sinai was 3 times the size of the rest of Israel. It took politicians from the phony right to carry out the vast majority of surrenders, retreats, and expulsions of Jews from their land. And if any government is going to be capable of creating a so-called Palestinian state, it will probably be a government from the phony right, not a government of the avowed left. Of course, we don't want the avowed left or the phony right in Israel. We want the real right, a real right-wing government in Israel for the first time in Israel's history. Since the creation of Israel in 1948, we've never had a real right-wing government. We've never had a real right-wing prime minister. We've never had a real right-wing political party other than the party of Morenu Verabbeinu Hara Meir Kehana Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha Hashem Yikom Damo. When Rabbi Kehana was running, he created a true right-wing party, and they banned him for it because they saw that he really meant what he was saying, that he would really carry out what he was promising to do. So they decided, of course, to ban him. And then he was murdered shortly after being banned. But with the exception of Rabbi Kehana, we haven't had a true right-wing party representing us in Israel. Hopefully we will. Let's hope in the next election that a right-wing party presents itself and runs a party that JTF can support. Let's hope that that happens, God willing. We should pray that will happen. The next subject that we're speaking about is going to be Mike Pence. But before we get to Mike Pence, let me just say, JTF is one of the few forces that is telling the truth to the people of Israel. We're the only ones that protested Netanyahu breaking his word about sending this money to Hebron. We're the only ones that did a video that protested about it. I didn't see anyone else speaking up about it. So in many, many instances, JTF, our Hebrew movement in Israel, is the only voice that speaks up when these betrayals take place, in many cases. Sometimes there are other voices. But in a case like this, we were the only voice to point out the example of this betrayal. That's why it's so important that we succeed. It's so important that we have as much support as possible and that we be as strong as possible in order to bring the truth to the people of Israel. So important. Let's get to Mike Pence now, the wimpy politician who is perhaps the wimpiest politician in all of America. This is a guy, you talk about Netanyahu giving into pressure, Mike Pence always gives into pressure, always on every issue, notoriously. We did a video yesterday, we released a video on Mike Pence and amnesty. Mike Pence was the main House Republican sponsor for massive amnesty. The main Senate Republican sponsor for amnesty was Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was the main traitor in the U.S. Senate, in the Republican Party, who was pushing for complete amnesty. Marco Rubio was the face of amnesty for the Republicans in the Senate. And Mike Pence was the face of amnesty for Republicans in the House. Mike Pence proposed what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce had long advocated. U.S. Chamber of Commerce representing big business, they want amnesty. They want tens of millions of illegal aliens from the third world to flood into the United States so they could have cheap labor. They don't care about America's future. They don't care if it destroys the country, as long as they have cheap labor and make a quick profit. They'll destroy the country, they'll destroy the whole world, as long as they can make a quick profit, as long as they can make a quick buck. And Mike Pence is their puppet. He does whatever the U.S. Chamber of Commerce tells him to do. And so he became the advocate for amnesty and proposed an amnesty bill. Even Ann Coulter, who is probably Donald Trump's most vociferous supporter, even she has condemned the selection of Mike Pence, and she referred to Mike Pence as a disaster. And there are many other people who support Trump, mainly on the immigration issue, who have been very disappointed and very upset with the selection of Mike Pence. Will it stop them from supporting Trump? Will they finally wake up and realize that Trump is a bluff, even on the issue of immigration? I doubt it, because they live in an illusion, they live in a fantasy world from the get-go, so I doubt that it will wake them up. But anyway, we did a video on that subject as well. That's just one example. On every single issue, Mike Pence is a traitor, a sellout, a fraud. On every single issue. On the issue of TPP, on the issue of trade, he wants trade agreements that will surrender America's sovereignty, that will surrender America's national sovereignty, and America, in effect, won't have any borders anymore, and will have no trade policies to protect American workers anymore. Mike Pence supports that policy and has been a strong advocate of Obama trade, of giving Barack Hussein Obama the authority to negotiate whatever trade agreements he wants on a fast track. In other words, very quickly. That'll be disastrous for this country, be disastrous for the economy, be disastrous for the demographic future of America. Mike Pence supports that. Donald Trump claimed to be against that, but he picks the vice president who was one of the biggest advocates of TPP. And Mike Pence, we're going to be, hopefully, God willing, I hope we'll be doing videos on this. We hope to be doing, in addition to the video we did on Mike Pence and amnesty, a video on how Mike Pence supports Obamacare, on how Mike Pence promoted Obamacare in Indiana, on how Mike Pence expanded Medicaid for lazy, parasitic loafers. He expanded this in Indiana. He expanded the Obamacare disastrous program. Mike Pence has sold out on religious liberty issues. He says he's an evangelical Christian. I mean, he was raised as a Roman Catholic, and his father was a Roman Catholic. But now he claims that he's an evangelical Christian. Okay, I'm not a Christian, so I can't judge and see whether or not he's really a Christian, not a Christian. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not a Christian. I'm an Orthodox Jew, so I'm not going to get into judging that issue. But I will say one thing. There's a tremendous difference between a wimpy, backsliding coward like Mike Pence and a stand-up, principled Christian like Ted Cruz. The difference is night and day. Mike Pence passed a religious liberty law in Indiana, which would have protected businesses from being forced to, for instance, bakers being forced to bake cakes for homosexual weddings, or other violations of religious conscience and religious principles. There's a religious liberty law to protect the First Amendment rights of Americans who, for religious reasons and for matters of conscience, cannot participate and cannot use their business to further causes like homosexuality and other things that go against their religious beliefs, that go against the laws of God and the laws of the Bible. And so the religious liberty law in Indiana was a good thing that passed, and Mike Pence signed it. But he quickly, almost immediately, backed down when he was under pressure. The minute he was under pressure, he backed down. Now, you know, a law was passed in North Carolina preventing deviants, homosexuals, deviants who want to go in and dress men who say that they really identify as women to go into the little girl's room. In North Carolina, they passed a law against that. And the governor of North Carolina, I have to say, who very often is an establishment guy, but in this case he has courageously stood his ground. And even though there are boycotts and there are other threats against North Carolina hasn't suffered from any of this, despite these boycott threats and the other things that have been thrown at North Carolina. The governor in North Carolina has stood his ground. The state legislature they've been standing firm, and I'm really proud of them for doing so. They have refused to back down and refused to give in to this law of allowing grown men to go into little girls' bathrooms. That's what the law wants to prevent. By the way, Donald Trump, as you know, as we publicize and as the Cruz campaign publicized, Donald Trump has said publicly that he agrees that grown men should be allowed to go into women's rooms and into women's bathrooms and little girls' bathrooms. He supports it. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. And so even Bruce Jenner, who now says that he's a woman, he's a woman with a male sexual organ. Bruce Jenner, in fact, went to Trump Tower to test that, and he went into the ladies' room, and he was welcomed, and they said, no, there's no problem. In fact, Donald Trump said if he wants to, he could use any bathroom he wants in Trump Tower. Donald Trump said it on national television. He doesn't have any problem with this. But anyway, North Carolina has stood firm against this insanity that Donald Trump supports and that the radical homosexual lobby supports. They stood firm, but not in Indiana. In Indiana, they caved in right away. That wimp, that coward Mike Pence right away caved in. They right away passed a clause saying, of course there's an exception here to protect what they call gays. To protect the gays, there's an exception here. So now if you're in North Carolina And I'm sorry, but now if you're in Indiana and you're a baker, you're a Christian baker or an Orthodox Jewish baker, and they come and say you have to bake a cake for a homosexual wedding or for a transgender wedding or some other insanity, you have to do it or you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You have to do it now, or you're going to go to court. They may arrest you. They may fine. They may give you a fine. All types of things can happen to you. You'll face lawsuits. You're under this situation in every possible facet of life now. You're forced to accept and acknowledge and glorify the homosexual lifestyle now. This is what they are forcing people to do, and thanks to Mike Pence, the wimp, in Indiana now, you can do that now. You can get away with that now. Unlike North Carolina, which stood firm, and unlike some other states which have stood firm and which have fought back. Utah, North Carolina, they've been fighting back in some states, and they haven't caved in. In Indiana, Mike Pence right away caved in. He folded like a cheap fan. What a wimp. I'm going to go into many other of these subjects in future videos, God willing. But Pence is a disaster. He's all talk, no action, a complete fraud. When it comes down to it, his policies will destroy the United States. I mean, he's against American sovereignty. He wants trade deals that destroy American sovereignty. He wants to open up the borders. It's the end of America. If we have the Mike Pence type, U.S. Chamber of Commerce type leaders in Washington, America's finished. And, you know, someone like Mike Pence, in that respect, is even worse than the Democrats. Why is he even worse than the Democrats? Because the Democrats, you have to remember, with the Democrats, they're evil, they're traitors, they're despicable, immoral, disgusting, cursed people, the Democrats. Absolute scum. But they have a problem. When they get into power, like we have with the Muslim Jew hater Barack Hussein Osama, when you have a president like Barack Hussein Osama, when he proposes legislation, the Republicans in the Congress resist him because he's a Democrat and they're Republicans. That's how the political game works in Washington. So at least we have some resistance when you have someone like Barack Hussein Osama proposing suicidal policies for the United States. At least there's some resistance. The problem with a Republican is, if you have a Republican president proposing it, even the Republicans cave in. The Republicans in Congress, the Democrats certainly are going to support. If you have a Republican president who supports amnesty, obviously the Democrats are going to agree with him on that. If you have a Republican president who's going to propose destroying America's borders and trade agreements that destroy America's sovereignty, obviously the Democrats are going to agree with that. The problem is, Republicans will also follow the party leader in most cases. And so when you have someone like Donald Trump proposing the things that he's proposing in favor of the gay agenda, pushback amnesty, which Trump supports and which Mike Pence supports, which means all they have to do is go across the border, they go across to Mexico, they just skip across the border briefly, immediately come back, and then when they come back, they're legal. Their status is legalized. That's pushback amnesty. That's the little trick that the Chamber of Commerce has been proposing for years. That's what Mike Pence sponsored in his legislation. That was Mike Pence's, he sponsored that disastrous suicidal legislation in the House. And Donald Trump supports pushback amnesty. He says the good ones are going to come back. Who are the good ones? The people who if they haven't been convicted of crimes, they're good ones. That's 99% of them. That's 99% of them. He says he's going to build a wall, Trump, but he says there's going to be a big, big door in the wall where they could all come back in. And they could all go through the door. So he's going to let them in. Even if he builds a wall, he's going to all let them through that wall. He's going to let them through the door in the wall. We need a president who's not going to let them in. We need a president who's going to keep the illegals out, who's going to deport the ones that are here, and who's going to send a clear signal that the day when America will allow this travesty to continue, the destruction of American sovereignty to continue, that day is over. Ted Cruz was the one guy who was proposing realistic proposals that would have done that. But all you Trumpsters, you rejected Ted Cruz, the honest guy, the true guy, the real tough guy, by the way, who doesn't cave in. You rejected him, and instead you supported the orange clown, Donald Trump, orange scum, Donald Trump, the Manhattan liberal, and Mike Pence. That's who you supported. Unfortunate. But we need JTF to tell the truth. We need JTF to tell the truth because we have tough times coming. If Hillary Clinton wins or if Donald Trump wins, either one of them, we got a rough ride ahead of us because both of them are terrible. And we need JTF to be a voice of right-wing resistance to the sellout policies that they're going to impose. When they propose amnesty, when they propose pushback amnesty, when they propose trade deals that will destroy American sovereignty, when they propose Israeli national suicide, when they propose continuing with the Iran nuclear agreement as Clinton and Trump have both proposed doing. Trump says it's a terrible agreement, but he can't rip it up. Just another example of just what a bluff, what a phony. And when Trump proposes giving nuclear bombs over to Saudi Arabia and to all these other countries, he thinks they should all go nuclear. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore that. That is a very dangerous threat. That's a threat of nuclear holocaust. We can't ignore when someone is saying he's going to do that as president. We can't pretend he didn't say that. We can't take a chance with someone who's saying he's going to give nuclear bombs to Saudi Arabia and South Korea and Japan and start spreading nuclear bombs to all these countries that never had them. He's going to reverse American policy. American policy has always been to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to prevent nuclear proliferation. He's going to reverse that and encourage all these countries to go nuclear, to have nuclear weapons. We can't take a chance on a lunatic that proposes something so crazy. We can't take a chance like that. It could lead to nuclear holocaust. It certainly endangers Israel tremendously. He's going to have these Arab countries all get nuclear bombs now? We can't take a chance with with a maniac that is proposing something so dangerous. We can't take a chance with someone like Donald Trump who said that he's not going to pay back bondholders, people who bought American government securities, American bonds. He's not going to pay them back. He's not going to give them back what they bought and paid for, what they were promised by the United States government. You know what type of panic that will cause? That's like the United States declaring bankruptcy, which Donald Trump himself did 4 times in his disastrous business career. His career was disastrous for the people who did business with him because he's a liar and a thief. And he wants to do that as president? To all the people in the United States and throughout the world that have invested in American bonds and securities? You know what that will do? You know what it'll do to the world markets? You have any idea what panic that will set off? That could lead to a Great Depression. We can't take a chance when someone says he's going to do that. We can't take a chance on a lunatic like that. So we're not supporting either one of the candidates. And we're going to be around to resist whatever crazy policies they propose. Don't you think we'd be better if JTF were stronger and could do more to persuade the people of Israel to adopt sane policies? Don't you think the world would be a better place if we could wake up more people in time so that we could support Ted Cruz running in 2020? After the election, we're going to start again with the Ted Cruz campaign for 2020. And of course, we have many other things on the horizon we're going to support. Just one of the other issues that I so much want to be involved with is Scottish independence. We owe the British. They murdered 6 million Jews during the Holocaust by closing the doors to the land of Israel, to millions of Jews who could have gotten out of Nazi-occupied Europe. 6 million of our brothers and sisters were murdered because of the British. We owe them. We owe them. And when Scotland and Northern Ireland won independence, and Wales too, they should be independent. If anything, will break up Great Britain and will give independence and answer the just aspirations of the people of Scotland, for instance, and the people of Northern Ireland. That's something we should support. We support reunifying Ireland. We support Scottish independence. Now that there's talk that there may be a Scottish independence referendum again, and polls show the majority of Scots want to be independent, that's something JTF will strongly support. If there is such an independence referendum, God willing, we will be doing videos and will strongly support the campaign for Scottish independence, because we owe the British. We owe them. And the people of Scotland have a right to be independent. They have a right to their own country. They have a right not to be dictated to by London. And so I think we could do some pretty persuasive videos on that will, on YouTube, those videos will reach the people of Scotland. People of Scotland will see the videos on YouTube. We'll have all the, in the search engine it'll all be Scottish videos, and they'll be seeing it from American Jews explaining to them why they should go for independence. I think the people of Scotland will find it very fascinating. We did one before the last Scottish independence referendum in 2004. We did just one video like that. It got thousands of views and a lot of response from the people in Scotland. If we had a real campaign like that, I think it would cause a lot of interest. I think they'd be fascinated by it. Anyway, these are just some of the projects that I look forward to doing, God willing. You know that JTF's message is vital. You know that. You understand that. Help us. Pray for us. Become active on our main page. Promote our Hebrew and English videos. Help us. And help us financially. That's our big downfall, is that we don't have the money that we need the budget that we need to really reach millions of people. We're reaching thousands, but we want to reach millions. And we can only do that if we had a decent sized budget. But whatever our budget is, every check, every money order, every cash donation sent to our post office box, it makes a difference. It makes a difference. God bless the great JTFers on a regular basis are sending checks and money orders and cash donations to our post office box. Equally good, equally effective is to make a contribution online if you prefer that for convenience sake with your credit card. You just go to our Hebrew main page, which is hayamin.org, and on top you have in English the word donate. It's the only English word on the whole page because the rest of the page is all in Hebrew. But on top you'll see the word donate very clearly written in Hebrew, and you just very clearly written in English, and you just click on the donate button, and in a couple of minutes you can very conveniently donate with your credit card through PayPal to JTF. Together, if we work as a team, we can accomplish great things, God willing, and we can still make a difference. We've got very tough challenges ahead of us, but if we work together as a team, hopefully we can wake enough people up to make a difference before it's too late. Let's do everything we can together as a team. Until next week for JTF, this is Chaim ben Pesach. Shalom.